My big house in New Brethren began to seem even bigger with each passing year. 74 years and the last 12 of them alone. My morning ritual is always the same. I wake up at 6, brew my coffee in an old-fashioned coffee pot I brought back from Europe in the 80s, and go out on the porch to watch the neighbors go about their business. Young families with children whiz by in minivans, always in a hurry. It amuses me. Where are they going in such a hurry? Life goes by faster than they think. I know it does. It's Tuesday, so Lysandra will call tonight. My daughter has grown up pragmatic and punctual, just like her father. She never forgets to call, but I always hear that note in her voice, a mixture of obligation and detachment. It's our special relationship, formal, cold, but unbreakable. Quentin Parkhurst came into our lives 6 years ago. I sensed falseness in him from the beginning, but Lysandra was crazy about her perfect man. A real estate broker with impeccable manners and a smile that never touches his eyes. My late husband Hugh would say he had the eyes of a snake oil salesman. My phone rang earlier than usual. Lysandra. Mom, Quentin and I want to stop by Sunday for lunch, if that's okay with you. Her voice sounded cheerful, too cheerful. Something's on her mind. Of course, darling. I'm always happy to see you. I tried to sound sincere, even though I sensed a catch. That's great. One more thing. Quentin wants to know if your country house needs to be checked. I think there was a problem with the pipes there last year. He's going that way for work this week anyway. That's it. Our country house an hour out of town was a family heirloom. Hugh built it himself when we were first married. I rarely go there now. Too many memories. This is the third time this month Quentin has offered to help with this house. The last time he checked the house, it was fine. I paused deliberately. But if it's not too much trouble, let him come by. The keys are in the same place. After the call, I sat in my office for a long time. Something about the situation made me uneasy. Quentin had never shown much interest in the family property before. Why the sudden concern? There was a small plot of land attached to the country house, but it was of no serious value, or was it? I pulled out a folder with the deeds to the house. I flipped through the papers, checking dates and amounts. The land around the house had really gone up in value in recent years, as city developers began to develop the neighborhood, but Quentin couldn't possibly have known that, unless he was checking it out. I closed the folder and rubbed my temples. Maybe I'm getting paranoid in my old age. Quentin is just showing concern, and I'm looking for ulterior motives. Still, something about his recent visits to the country house bothered me. My neighbor, Irma Caldwell, drops in on me for tea every Wednesday. She's 78 and knows all the New Britain gossip. I've never been interested in local gossip, but today I thought I'd make an exception. Irma, have you by any chance heard anything about the new developments around the lake? That's where our country house is. Irma perked up, as she always did when there was a chance to share information. Oh, Aldine, there's so much going on. Empire Developments is buying up land left and right. They say they're building an upscale development with a golf club. Prices for plots of land have skyrocketed. I stirred my tea slowly, digesting the information. Empire Developments. I've heard that name before. By the way, doesn't your son-in-law work in real estate? Irma asked casually. He might be able to give you some sound advice about selling if you ever think about it. That was it. Quentin often referred to his important clients, but never gave specific names. It was entirely possible that Empire was among them. After Irma left, I went online and checked the Empire Development's website. The About Us page listed partners and consultants. Quentin's name wasn't there, but that didn't mean anything. Such connections are rarely publicized. I decided to check my suspicions. I had a friend, Prue Holdsworth, whose grandson Eben worked for a company that installed video surveillance systems. A day after talking to Irma, Eben was already sitting in my living room explaining the various camera options. Mrs. Campbell, are you sure you want to install the cameras covertly? We usually recommend open systems as a deterrent to thieves. I don't want to deter thieves, young man. I want to catch them red-handed. I tried to sound convincing. At my age, it's important to protect the property that will go to the children. He nodded, though there was doubt in his eyes. Young people always think old people are a little crazy. I can set up the mini cameras tomorrow morning. They'll transmit the images directly to your computer or phone. Discreet, but with good picture quality. And sound, I added. And sound, I added. Eben left, promising to return the next day. I spent the evening looking through the family albums. One of the pictures showed Hugh standing in front of the unfinished country house, smiling proudly. He had put so much love into this place, and now it would probably become part of someone's commercial project. I turned the page. Lysandra at 8 years old, pigtailed, sitting on her father's shoulders by the lake. They had always been close. After Hugh died, she withdrew, distanced herself from me. Maybe in Quentin she was looking for a replacement for her father. The thought made me frown. Quentin was the opposite of Hugh, calculating, cold, ambitious. The next morning, Eben arrived with the equipment. We went to the country house. I'd rarely been there in recent years, and now, opening the door, I felt a pang of guilt. The house looked abandoned, although Quentin, to his credit, kept it tidy. "Where would you like to set up the cameras, Mrs. Campbell?" Eben asked, looking around. I pointed out the key places: the terrace where we usually gathered on summer evenings, the living room overlooking the bar, the hallway, and the driveway. Make them out of sight. I want to know what goes on in my house when I'm not there. Eben worked quickly and professionally. 3 hours later, everything was ready. 4 hidden cameras, invisible to the naked eye. "Here's an app for your phone." Eben showed me the simple interface. "Here you can view the cameras in real time or recordings. The system activates when you move, so don't worry about extra hours of recording." I thanked him and generously paid for the work. As we drove away, I cast one last look at the house. Now I would know what was going on here. Back at home, I checked the app. Everything was working. I could see the empty terrace, the deserted living room. All I had to do was wait. Sunday lunch with Lysandra and Quentin passed tensely. I watched my son-in-law carefully, trying to catch hints of his true intentions, but he was as impeccable as ever. "Checked your country house, Aldine," he said over dessert. "Everything's in perfect order, even cleaned the gutters of leaves." "That's very nice of you." I smiled, hoping the smile didn't look too strained. "Quentin is so thoughtful." Lysandra stroked his arm. "Always thinking about family." I almost choked on my tea, but I held back. "Yes, a real treasure." Quentin shrugged modestly. "It's the least I can do. By the way, I noticed you've got a nice plot there, overlooking the lake. You know, land in that neighborhood is really appreciating right now. Here it is. I took a good look at it." "You did? I hadn't heard of it." "Oh, yes," Quentin brightened up. "Empire Developments is buying up everything around here for a luxury development. If you ever think of selling, I can help you with an appraisal." "I don't plan to sell." I cut him off. "Hugh built this house. It will stay in the family." Quentin's face changed for a moment, a flicker of irritation, but he quickly returned his usual smile. "Of course, I just meant that you're sitting on a gold mine. But family history is priceless." Lunch was over. Lysandra and Quentin left. I sat in a chair by the window pondering. I was almost certain now that Quentin was up to something with my country house. But why would he come there so often? I didn't wait long. The following Friday, my phone beeped a motion sensor in the driveway of the country house. I opened the app and saw Quentin's black SUV parking in front of the house. But what surprised me most was that he wasn't alone. A young woman I'd never seen before stepped out of the car. She was good looking, tall, slender, with long dark hair. She and Quentin walked toward the house close to each other, but not touching, like people used to hiding their relationship. I switched to the camera in the hallway and watched them enter. Quentin moved with the confidence of a man who frequents this place. He led the woman straight to the terrace where I used to have tea with Lysandra when she was still a teenager. Distant, roomy, you're going to love it here. Quentin's voice sounded intimate, not the way he spoke in my presence. Best view in the neighborhood. Are you sure your mother-in-law won't show up out of the blue? There was concern in the girl's voice. Quentin laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. Aldine? She's hardly traveled here since she was widowed. Anyway, it's Friday night. She's playing bridge with her elderly friends. Then she takes sleeping pills and goes to bed at 9. I gritted my teeth. Not only was he bringing his mistress into my house, but he was discussing me like that. What about your wife? I asked the girl he called Rumi. That's a strange name. Lysandra has a corporate party tonight. She'll come back late and think I'm in a meeting with clients. I watched Quentin open the bar on the terrace, the same one that held Hugh's collection of wines. He selected a bottle of red and showed it to Rumi. Chateau Margaux, 2005. His father-in-law was a wine connoisseur. They sat in wicker chairs on the terrace, and Quentin poured the wine into glasses. From here, they looked like a happy couple, enjoying an evening in nature. If I hadn't known the truth, I might even have cringed. How's it going with the paperwork? Rumi asked, taking a sip of wine. Everything's going according to plan. Lysandra doesn't suspect a thing, and the old woman is too proud to admit she doesn't like me. Typical story, thinks no one is worthy of her precious daughter. I felt the blood rush to my face. Rage was rising in me in waves. This man wasn't just cheating on my daughter. He was talking about us with such contempt. What if she suspected something? Rumi seemed worried. She won't. Aldine is too busy with her book clubs and charity work to notice the obvious. And Lysandra, he grinned, she's so afraid of becoming like her overbearing mother that she'll never ask me an uncomfortable question. They continued talking, moving from discussing me and Lysandra to their plans. I listened intently, memorizing every detail, every word. It went on for over an hour. They finished the bottle of wine, and then Quentin took Rumi to the bedroom on the second floor. I turned the sound off. Some things even I didn't want to hear. Sitting in my living room in New Brethren, I could feel a cold, calculating rage growing inside me. Not just over the cheating. Cheating happens. But because of the neglect. Because of how easily this man came into our lives and thought he could play us. I took some screenshots from the cameras and saved video clips of the conversation. Then I opened my address book and found 2 numbers I hadn't dialed in a while. The first one belonged to Radley Brookhaven. We'd known each other since we were young, and though we'd never been close romantically, he'd always remained a trusted friend. He was now a detective with the New Britain Police Department, not the highest rank, but with a good reputation. The second number belonged to Silas Whitaker, my cousin, and also one of the best family law attorneys in town. We hadn't spoken in the last few years because of a stupid argument at a family gathering, but I knew he wouldn't say no. I didn't call them right away. I needed a plan first. Quentin visited the country house with Rumi about once a week, usually on Fridays when Lysandra was working late. I needed to catch them together with irrefutable evidence and do it in such a way that Lysandra couldn't deny the truth. For the next week, I watched the cameras every day, but Quentin didn't show up. I began to worry that he had somehow discovered the surveillance system, but on Friday, my phone beeped again. This time they arrived earlier and stayed longer. Rumi brought food from the restaurant. They dined on the terrace. Quentin opened Hugh's wine cabinet again. Their conversation became more frank. In 2 months, everything will be ready, Quentin said, pouring the wine. Lysandra will sign the documents without even reading them. She trusts me. What about her mother? Rumi asked, spearing shrimp on her fork. Does she suspect anything? The old woman? No, she's too busy judging everyone around her. Besides, she never got into financial matters. Hugh kept her out of it, and she's used to it. I took a deep breath, feeling my hands clench into fists. Quentin was dead wrong about me. Hugh had really tried to keep me out of the finances, but after his death, I'd had to get into everything, and I was much more capable than he realized. Now I knew exactly what was going on. Quentin wasn't just cheating on Lysandra, he was planning some kind of fraud with my property, with the country house, and Rumi was his accomplice. I took a few more screenshots and recorded this conversation. Then I dialed Radley's number. His gruff voice answered after the third dial tone. Brookhaven here. Radley, this is Aldine Campbell. A short pause. We haven't spoken in over a year. Aldine, is something wrong? I need your help. It's about my brother-in-law. I think he's planning something naughty with my property, and I have proof. Radley was silent for a moment, then sighed. Are you sure this isn't a family misunderstanding? Maybe you should talk to your daughter. If it were just about the affair, I could handle it on my own. But it's more than that. I need a cop and a lawyer, and I'm willing to pay for it. I'll stop by tomorrow, he said after a pause. But no promises. Then I called Silas. The conversation was more strained. Old grudges aren't easily forgotten, but he agreed to meet and listen to me. Tomorrow they'll both come to my place, and we'll go over the security footage together, and then we'll come up with a plan of action. I will not let Quentin deceive my daughter and steal our family property. It's time to show that an old woman of 74 can still stand up for herself and her family. And Quentin Parkhurst is about to find out that messing with Aldine Campbell was a very, very bad idea. Radley and Silas came to see me Saturday afternoon. I made coffee and pulled out the cookies I'd baked that morning. Old habits are hard to eradicate. Once upon a time, I was the perfect hostess, always ready to receive guests. Hugh insisted that. A wife should create comfort, he used to say, not noticing the irony that after a day of housework, I didn't have the energy to enjoy that comfort. Thank you for coming. I gestured for the men to sit in the living room. I know I've called you here for an unusual occasion. Radley, a large man with shrewd gray eyes, nodded, settling into a chair. Anything for you, Aldine, though I admit your call surprised me. Silas, tall and lean, his graying hair slicked back, was more reserved. The last time we'd seen each other was at the funeral of his mother, my aunt, 3 years ago. We'd had a big fight over some silly thing involving a family heirloom. It seemed so insignificant now. What exactly is going on, Alden? Silas asked, taking a cup of coffee. You didn't say much on the phone. I took a deep breath and walked over to the computer on the table in the corner of the living room. I'd better show you. I started up the security footage. On the screen, Quentin and his companion entered the country house. Their conversation on the terrace, drinking wine from Hugh's collection, unpleasant comments about me and Lysandra. I could see Radley's face growing more and more tense as I watched. This guy is a real piece of... He paused, remembering he was in my house. I'm sorry, Aldine. You don't have to apologize, I smiled weakly. I thought of him in similar terms myself. Silas was scrutinizing the screen, particularly interested in the moment when Quentin and Rumi were discussing some documents. Do you know what documents they're talking about? He asked, pausing the video. I can guess. Quentin had recently started showing interest in my country house. He mentioned that Empire Developments was buying up land in the area. And he's working with them? Not officially, but I suspect there's a connection. Radley shook his head. It's a classic scheme. The husband gets access to his wife's family's property and slowly moves the assets out. It's not just that, I said quietly. It's about my daughter. It's about the way he's treating her. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly tired. The last few days of intense camera watching had exhausted me more than I realized. Tell us more about your family, Aldine, Radley suggested, setting aside his coffee cup. What kind of person is your daughter, and how did she get involved with a guy like Quentin? I stood up and walked over to the mantelpiece where the family photos stood. I took one, in a simple silver frame. Lysandra in her graduation gown, serious and beautiful. My daughter had always been a smart girl. Too smart, perhaps, and too observant. I walked back to the chair, still holding the picture. When she was 10, she asked me why I let her father treat me like that. I didn't know what to answer. Radley and Silas exchanged glances. They had both known Hugh in his lifetime, though they hadn't been particularly close to him. Hugh was a complicated man, Silas said diplomatically. I grinned bitterly. Hugh was a tyrant. Let's call things by their proper names. A brilliant engineer, a wealthy man, respected in the community, and an absolute despot at home. Everything had to be according to his rules, even the way I arranged the flowers in the vase. I felt a lump in my throat and paused to deal with my emotions. When we met, I was 19. He seemed so strong, so confident. I thought it was protection, stability. I realized my mistake too late. Why didn't you leave? Radley asked quietly. Because of Lysandra, I answered without hesitation. She was everything to me, and Hugh had once made it very clear that if I ever tried to leave and take her, he would use all his connections and money to get custody, and I knew he could do it. I put the picture on the table next to me. So I stayed, be patient, pretended everything was okay. And Lysandra watched and learned. She saw how I obeyed, how I smiled when I wanted to scream, and she swore to herself she would never be like me. Memories came flooding back to me, vivid and painful. Lysandra the teenager, slamming the door of her room. Lysandra at university, barely calling home. Lysandra at Hugh's funeral, dry-eyed and straight, while I sobbed, not so much from grief as from relief and shame at that relief. After Hugh's death, I had hoped that my daughter and I would grow closer, but that didn't happen. Too much unspoken resentment, too much resentment from her. She saw me as a weak woman who let herself be broken. Radley frowned. And that's when Quentin came along? Yes, 6 years ago. The perfect candidate for Lysandra. Handsome, successful, with impeccable manners. The complete opposite of her father. In looks. She was so attracted to him, so happy. I didn't dare voice my concerns. What made you suspicious? Silas asked, always attentive to detail. Little things, I shrugged. The way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching appraisingly, as if she were an acquisition. The way he skillfully flattered people he thought were useful. The way he treated waiters and servants coldly. I poured myself another coffee, pondering. The ironic thing was that Lysandra had tried so hard not to repeat my fate, and still married a manipulative man, just in a different package. Did you try to talk to her about your suspicions? Radley asked. Once, she accused me of being jealous of her happiness. I grinned bitterly. Said I couldn't stand the fact that she'd found the true love I'd never had. Cruel, Silas commented. But partly true, I admitted. I'd never really known true love with Hugh, and perhaps my rejection of Quentin had been colored by that bitterness at first. But now, I pointed to the computer screen. Now I have proof. Quentin is using my daughter and planning an unfair deal with our estate. Radley rubbed his chin thoughtfully. What exactly do you want us to do, Aldine? I want to catch him red-handed. When he brings his mistress to the country house again, I want to get there with you, with a policeman and a lawyer. I want Lysandra to know the truth so that Quentin can't get away with it. It's risky, Silas warned. Lysandra might not believe even direct evidence. People often deny the obvious when it comes to their loved ones. I know, I nodded, but I have to try. And I want to protect our property from his machinations. The men looked at each other, and I could see their doubts. To them, this was just a family drama, perhaps even the whimsy of a lonely older woman. Look, I'm not crazy or paranoid. I straightened in my chair. After Hugh died, I learned how to manage our finances. I've studied all the paperwork. I've mastered the computer. I've learned about investments. I'm not the helpless old woman Quentin thinks I am. Radley raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. Nobody thinks you're helpless, Aldine. We just want to make sure you understand the possible consequences. Lysandra might resent you for interfering. She already resents me, I answered quietly, for not protecting her from her father, for being weak. Maybe now I could finally show her another example of how a mother can and should fight for her daughter. There was silence. Then Silas nodded slowly. Okay, I'm in. But I suggest we analyze the legal side of the matter first. Who owns the country house? Who are the deeds to the house? The house is in my name. So is the land. When Hugh died, the property passed to me. Does your daughter have any rights to the property? Maybe Hugh left her a share? I shook my head. No, Hugh left everything to me. But I have a will that leaves everything to Lysandra when I die. Does Quentin know about this will? Yes, I discussed it in front of him a few years ago. Silas wrote something down in his notebook. Any documents Lysandra signed recently? Maybe powers of attorney, sales contracts, something to do with property? I wondered. I don't know. We don't discuss such things. She's pretty independent financially. We should check. Silas continued to make notes. Quentin may have already started to act. I can request extracts from the real estate registry, see if there's been any change in the status of your country house. Radley, meanwhile, was reviewing the security footage. This woman, Rumi, have you ever seen her before? Never. I shook my head. Lysandra never mentioned her. I think she's from Quentin's other social circle. She looks professional, Radley said. She doesn't look like a casual fling. Maybe they're working together on something. Something to defraud my daughter and steal our property. I finished grimly. I went to the window and looked out at my neat garden. Hugh had insisted on strict geometry in the beds and perfectly trimmed shrubs. After his death, I had allowed the garden to become more natural, wilder. It was one of the few ways I could assert my independence. You know what the worst part is? I said without turning around. I see myself in Lysander, the same denial of the obvious, the same desire to believe that everything is all right, even when all the signs say otherwise. I turned to the men. I couldn't save myself from Hugh, but maybe I could save Lysandra from Quentin. Radley and Silas were silent, giving me a chance to speak. After Hugh died, when I was sorting through his things, I found correspondence. He cheated on me for most of our lives together, I said quietly, almost detachedly. Different women, different cities, business trips, conferences. He was very careful, very methodical. But he kept letters, photographs. Maybe as trophies, maybe he just forgot about them. I went back to my chair and sat down, straightening my back, as I had been taught in a girls' school many decades ago. I hadn't told anyone about this, not even Lysandra, especially Lysandra. Why destroy her memory of her father? But now I think maybe I should have told her. Maybe then she would have been more careful with men like Quentin. Silas finally broke the silence. Aldine, I understand your desire to protect your daughter, but there's a risk that interfering will only push her further away. I'm willing to take that risk, I said firmly. What could be worse than watching her repeat my mistakes? Radley shook his head. Yeah, family history tends to repeat itself if you don't interrupt it. He finished his coffee and set the cup on the table. All right, I'll help you. But let's do it right. No impulsive action. We'll observe, gather evidence, and then choose the right moment for confrontation. Agreed. Silas nodded. I'll check the legal side of the matter and prepare the necessary documents. If Quentin is really planning some sort of estate fraud, we need to be prepared to protect your assets. I felt the tension that had been weighing me down for the past few weeks ease a little. I'm not alone. I have allies. Thank you both, I said sincerely. I know this goes beyond a normal friendship. That's what old friends are for, Radley smiled. Besides, I've wanted to catch some slippery type by the hand for a long time. At my age, you don't get interesting cases very often. I smiled back, remembering the young, enthusiastic Radley he'd been 50 years ago. Time has changed us all, but some things remain the same, like his sense of justice. We agreed on the next steps. Silas will handle the paperwork and check the legal status of the country house. Radley will look for information on Quentin Parkhurst and his possible ties to Empire Developments. I will continue to watch through the cameras and let them know when Quentin reappears at the country house with Rumi. After the men left, I sat in the silence of my house for a long time. My mind reeled with memories Lysandra as a child, running around the garden. Teenage Lysandra arguing with Hugh about her future. Lysandra in her wedding dress, beaming with happiness as Quentin put the ring on her finger. I remembered my anxiety that day, my carefully concealed fear that history was repeating itself. But now I had a chance to change everything, to protect the daughter I'd failed to protect then, to show her that a woman at any age can find the strength to stand up to lies and manipulation. I stood up and walked over to the picture on the mantelpiece, Lysandra and I years ago, when she was very young. Her trusting smile, my arms around her, my daughter, my responsibility. I won't let you down this time, I whispered to the pictures. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. Lysandra was calling, inviting me to Sunday lunch. I accepted, trying to sound casual. Things would change soon enough, but for now, I had to play my role, the role I'd been playing for decades, the role of the woman who accepts everything and asks for nothing. But inside me, a resolve was growing. I was no longer the Aldine who had meekly endured humiliation from Hugh. I was a woman who had survived 74 years of life, who had learned to control her finances, her home, her destiny. And now I was going to use that power to protect my daughter and our future. I went back to the computer and turned on the security footage again. On the screen, Quentin and Rumi were laughing, drinking Hugh's wine, making plans, unaware that I was watching them, that I was preparing to strike. This time, history will not repeat itself. This time, I'll be the one in control. The week after the meeting with Radley and Silas passed in tense anticipation. I checked the cameras every 2 hours, going through Lysandra's emails that she occasionally forwarded to me, trying to catch any hints of Quentin's plans. Silas called on Wednesday, saying he'd checked the real estate registry, no change in the status of the country house yet. Radley promised to stop by on Friday with information about Quentin. On Thursday, I took Lysandra out to lunch, without Quentin. She looked tired but happy. She talked about her work, her vacation plans, a book she had recently read. I listened and tried to see any sign of doubt or suspicion in her eyes, but there was only the usual slight irritation at me, mixed with filial affection. "How is Quentin doing?" I asked as casually as possible, pouring tea. "Busy as ever, working hard. He has a big project with new clients right now. Yeah? I raised an eyebrow. What kind of project? Lysandra shrugged. Something to do with country real estate. You know how passionate he is about his work. I nodded, fighting the urge to tell her the truth right now. But it was too soon. I needed hard evidence. By the way, Lysandra added casually, Quentin has offered to check the country house again tomorrow. He has a meeting with a client nearby. I tensed inwardly, but tried to keep my expression calm. Sure, if it's not too much trouble. By the way, I was going to stop by there this weekend too. I haven't been to your father's house in a while. Lysandra frowned slightly. Maybe we shouldn't bother Quentin then. You'll check it out for yourself. No, no, let him go, I said hastily. I have other plans for tomorrow anyway. I'll stop by on Sunday or early next week. That was a lie. I didn't have any other plans. But now I knew that Quentin would be at the country house again tomorrow. And probably not alone. As soon as Lysandra left, I called Radley and Silas. We agreed to meet tomorrow at a cafe near the country house, as we'd planned earlier. I'd watch through the cameras and signal when Quentin and Rumi were there. Friday morning, I got up early, even though I had hardly slept the night before. I drank 2 cups of strong coffee, showered, and styled my hair. I put on a dark blue dress, austere but elegant. I wanted to look focused and confident for the upcoming confrontation. At 10 hours and 37 minutes, the motion detector in the driveway of the country house went off. Quentin's black SUV pulled up in front of the house. He got out of the car, followed by Rumi. They looked relaxed, confident, no tension, no caution. They didn't realize they were under surveillance. I called Radley immediately. They're in place, I reported. Meet me in 20 minutes. Before I left, I gathered up all the printed photos and video files I downloaded to a flash drive. Then I pulled Hugh's old gun out of the closet. He kept it for self-defense, though he never used it. I wasn't going to threaten anyone, but I felt safer knowing I had it on me. I put the gun in my purse and closed the door behind me. Radley and Silas were already waiting for me at the agreed-upon place, a small cafe about 15 minutes from the country house. Radley was in civilian clothes, but he had his police badge with him. Silas looked as impeccable as ever in his gray suit. "Are they still there?" Radley asked when I got to their table. I checked my phone. The camera app showed Quentin and Rumi on the patio. They were seated in wicker chairs, a table with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses between them. Yes, on the terrace, I confirmed. As usual, they were drinking wine from Hugh's collection. "Are you ready?" Silas asked seriously. "It's not too late to change your mind." I shook my head. "More than ready. Let's go." We decided to take one car, Radley's company car. That way, there would be more of a surprise when Quentin saw the police car in the driveway. On the way out, I checked the cameras again. Rumi and Quentin were still on the terrace, but their postures had changed. They were sitting closer together, their knees touching. The conversation seemed more intimate. I turned on the sound. "In a month, everything will be ready," Quentin said. "Lysandra will sign the papers next week. She doesn't even read what she signs. She trusts me completely." "Is this land really worth that much?" Rumi asked, sipping her wine. "More than you can imagine. Empire is willing to pay 7 figures. The site fits perfectly into their development plan. And this wreck," he pointed to the house, "is going to be demolished." I felt the blood rush to my face. The house Hugh had built with his own hands, the house where Lysandra had grown up, he called it a wreck? "What would your mother-in-law say?" Rumi seemed worried. "It's her house." Quentin grinned smugly. By the time she found out, it would be too late to change anything. Technically, the house will be jointly owned by me and Lysandra, and then he made a gesture as if it would disappear. He made a gesture as if something had disappeared. "Goodbye, old house. Hello, new life." and there's nothing Alden can do about it. I turned off the sound, feeling my hands shake with anger. Now I had all the proof I needed. Quentin wasn't just cheating on Lysandra. He was planning to steal the family property. Did you hear that? I asked Radley and Silas, who were also listening to the conversation. Radley nodded grimly. Enough to know that this guy's a real rat. Legally, Silas said thoughtfully. This could be considered attempted fraud, especially if the documents he lets Lysandra sign contain false information. We pulled up to the country house and stopped in the driveway, right behind Quentin's SUV. I saw him notice the police car through the patio window. His face changed, and he said something quickly to Rumi. "Let's wait a minute," Radley suggested. "Let them be nervous." We sat in the car, watching the house. Through the app on my phone, I could see Quentin and Rumi hurriedly collecting glasses and bottles, trying to hide their presence. "That's enough," I said after a moment. "It's time." We got out of the car and headed toward the house. I walked in front, Radley and Silas following behind me. When we got to the terrace, Quentin was already at the door, ready to greet us. Rumi was sitting in a chair, seemingly calm, but her fingers were nervously fiddling with the strap of her purse. "Aldine?" Quentin gave a look of surprise. "What a pleasant surprise. Lysandra said you were going to stop by this weekend." "Change of plans," I replied briefly, glaring at him. "I see you have company." Quentin glanced at Rumi, then back at me. "Yes, this is Rumi Holt, a colleague of mine. We were discussing a potential deal for a client." "A colleague," I repeated skeptically. "I see. And these," I pointed to Radley and Silas, "are my colleagues, Detective Brookhaven of the New Britain Police Department and my attorney Silas Whitaker." Quentin's face froze, but he quickly regained his composure. "It's a pleasure to meet you, gentlemen. May I ask to what I owe this, official visit?" Radley stepped forward, his presence instantly filling the terrace. "We've received information about possible real estate fraud, Mr. Parkhurst, and about adultery, which, while not a crime, usually attracts considerable interest in the family courts." "Fraud? Infidelity?" Quentin looked genuinely indignant. "This is some kind of mistake. I'm here for work." Rumi is a real estate specialist, and we're discussing a potential deal for a client. "On the terrace of your mother-in-law's house? With a bottle of collector's wine?" Radley nodded at the bottle Quentin hadn't had time to put away. "An unusual setting for a business meeting." "We like an informal atmosphere," Rumi interjected, rising from her chair. "And the wine. It was my idea. I saw the collection and couldn't resist." I apologize if this seems inappropriate. I pulled out my phone and opened the video I recorded through the security cameras. I thought it would clear things up. I pressed play. On the screen, Quentin had his arm around Rumi. They were kissing. Then he spoke. "Lysandra will never know. She trusts me blindly." Quentin's face contorted. "You set up cameras? Spied on me? That's an invasion of privacy." "This is my home," I replied calmly. "I have a right to know what goes on in it, especially when my son-in-law brings his mistress here and plans a scam on my property." "It's not what you think." Quentin took a step in my direction, but Radley blocked his path. "I think it's exactly what we all think, Mr. Parkhurst." Radley's voice was deceptively soft. "You're using this house to meet with Ms. Holt, and you're planning some kind of real estate scam, possibly involving empire developments." At the mention of the company, Rumi visibly tensed. Quentin threw a warning glance at her. "That's absurd. I'm just helping Aldine with the upkeep of the house. And yes, I sometimes hold business meetings here. What's criminal about that?" Silas, who had been silent until then, pulled a folder out of his briefcase. "As far as criminal activity goes, Mr. Parkhurst, We have reason to believe that you are planning to illegally obtain the rights to this house and land for the purpose of selling it to Empire Developments, possibly using forged documents or misleading your wife. That's slander, Quentin exclaimed. You have no proof whatsoever. I picked up the phone again and turned on another recording. The conversation we'd heard just 15 minutes earlier, where Quentin was describing his plan in detail. As the recording played, Quentin's face grew paler and paler. Rumi sank back into her chair, covering her face with her hands. This, it's taken out of context. Quentin tried to object, but his voice sounded less sure. What other context is needed for goodbye, old house, hello, new life? I asked, feeling the anger I'd been holding back for so long finally break through. Or for the way you call my daughter a gullible fool who will sign anything you slip her? I never said she was a fool. Quentin was indignant. But you don't deny the rest? I parried. There was a long pause. Quentin looked from me to Radley, then to Silas, like a cornered animal looking for a way out. Look, he said finally, lowering his voice. Let's be mature about this. I'm sure we can come to an agreement that will satisfy everyone. Offering a bribe in front of a policeman? Silas grinned. That's not a smart move. No, I meant a reasonable compromise, Quentin explained hastily. After all, this is a family matter, and there's no need to take it public. Think of Lysandra, of how this will hurt her. I felt something inside me break at the mention of my daughter. Don't you dare use her name. My voice shook with rage. You betrayed her. You were going to steal from her, and now you're trying to manipulate me by using her feelings? Rumi stood up suddenly, straightening to her full height. Enough, Quentin, she said firmly. The game is over. They know everything. She turned to me. Mrs. Campbell, I apologize for taking part in this unworthy endeavor. I made the mistake of contacting your son-in-law. Quentin looked at her with disbelief. Rumi, what are you doing? What I should have done from the beginning, she answered without looking at him. Telling the truth. She took a deep breath. Quentin and I have known each other for 3 years. Our relationship started before his marriage to your daughter. He promised he would marry me, but then he met Lysandra and saw in an opportunity. Rumi, shut up, Quentin said through gritted teeth. An opportunity to gain access to your property through your daughter, Rumi continued, ignoring him. I was heartbroken at first, but then he convinced me it was part of the plan, that after the Empire deal, he'd divorce Lysandra and we'd be together. That's bullshit, Quentin shouted, taking a step toward Rumi, but Radley grabbed his arm. Quiet, buddy, he warned. The ladies are talking here. I stared at Rumi in amazement. This was not what I had expected from the meeting. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Rumi met my gaze, her eyes a mixture of determination and shame. Because I'm pregnant with his child, 4 months, and I don't want my baby to be born into this web of lies. There was dead silence. Even Radley and Silas, who'd seen it all, looked shocked. What? Quentin wheezed, his face turning even paler. You didn't tell me, because I knew you'd try to make me get rid of the baby, Rumi answered emotionlessly. Just like you did 2 years ago. I felt my legs weakening, and I sank into the nearest chair. This was getting worse than I'd realized. Not just adultery, not just a financial scam, but a child, too. Does Lysandra know? I asked quietly. Rumi shook her head. Not to my knowledge, no. Quentin is very careful. He always said she didn't suspect anything. Quentin seemed to finally realize the hopelessness of his situation. His shoulders slumped, his self-confidence evaporated. All right, he said tiredly. You've won. What now? Will you go to Lysandra? Tell her everything? I rose slowly from the chair, feeling every year of my age, every wrinkle in my face, every gray in my hair, but I also felt power, the power of truth, the power of justice. Yes, Quentin, we will tell Lysandra everything, your treason, your plans for our property, the child. She deserves to know the truth, however painful it may be. It would break her heart. He tried to object. Is that what you want? No, I shook my head. I would want my daughter to be happily married to an honest, loving man. But you're not that man, and better a broken heart now than a ruined life later. Mrs. Campbell, Rumi stepped forward. Yeah, I'd like to speak to your daughter personally. Explain the situation. She deserves to hear the truth, not just from you or him, but from me. I looked closely at this young woman. There was something in her eyes that spoke of real remorse, of wanting to make something of this terrible situation. All right, I agreed. But first we'll talk to her alone, Quentin and I. And then, if she wants, you can meet her. What about the papers? Silas intervened. If Mr. Parkhurst was really planning an estate fraud, there could be legal ramifications. Radley nodded. We can launch a formal investigation, especially if there are documents with forged signatures or false information. Quentin turned even paler. Look, I can fix this. No documents have been signed yet. It was just plans. Talk. We'll find out, Silas said firmly. In the meantime, I think we should all go back to town. Mr. Parkhurst, I recommend that you don't leave New Brethren any time soon. I looked out at the terrace where I had sat so many times with Hugh, where Lysandra had played as a child, where we had had family dinners. Now that place was desecrated by lies and betrayal, but perhaps today's confrontation was the first step toward purification. Pack up, I said to Quentin and Rumi. We're going back to the city, and get ready for a very unpleasant conversation. Quentin nodded silently, his usual self-assurance completely evaporated. Rumi gathered her things, trying not to meet anyone's eyes. We left the house as a group. I was in the lead, followed by Radley and Quentin, then Silas and Rumi. At the cars, Radley offered, I can take Mr. Parkhurst, and you, Silas, can take Miss Holt. Aldine, are you coming with us or in your car? My car, I replied. I need time to think. Before I got into the car, I took another look at the country house. Despite everything that had happened, it was still beautiful, simple, but elegant, overlooking the lake. Hugh had put his whole soul into it, and I wouldn't let anyone ruin his legacy. On the way into town, I pondered how to tell Lysandra, how to prepare her for the news that would turn her life upside down. I knew she might accuse me of interfering, of ruining her marriage, but better her anger than living a lie. I called her from the road. Lysandra, it's Mom. We need to talk. It's urgent and important. What's wrong? Her voice immediately became anxious. Are you okay? I'm fine, I assured her. But there's something you need to know. About Quentin. A pause, then quiet. What about Quentin? Not on the phone, dear. I'm on my way home. Can you come to my place in an hour? You're scaring me, Mom. I know, I'm sorry, but it's really important. After another pause, she agreed. Okay, I'll be there in an hour. I disconnected and gripped the steering wheel tighter. I was about to have the hardest conversation of my life, but strangely, I was relieved. No more secrets, no more lies. Just the truth, no matter how bitter it was. Back home, I opened an old photo album. One of the pictures was of little Lysandra, laughing with ice cream on her nose. In the other, she was a teenager, serious, with a book in her hands. My daughter, so strong and yet so vulnerable. I couldn't protect her from Hugh, but now I had a chance to protect her from Quentin. The doorbell rang exactly 1 hour later. Lysandra was always punctual. I took a deep breath, closed the scrapbook, and went to open the door, preparing myself for the conversation that would change everything. Lysandra stood in my living room, clutching a cup of tea. Her face, usually expressing restrained irritation in my presence, was frozen in a mask of shock. I had just shown her the camera footage Quentin and Rumi on the terrace of the country house, their conversations about plans, Rumi's confession of pregnancy. "It's a montage," she finally said, her voice shaking. "You've always hated Quentin. This is an attempt to destroy my marriage. I'd expected this reaction, but it still hurt. Lysandra, I understand how you feel, but these are real tapes. I installed the cameras because I suspected something was wrong. You installed spy cameras in the house my husband visits." Her voice got higher. "You invaded our privacy. How could you, Mom? This is my home," I reminded her calmly, "and I hadn't planned to spy. But Quentin had started offering to check the house too often. It seemed strange. He just wanted to help. You always see the worst in people, especially men. It's your father complex." My daughter's harsh words hit the mark. I took a deep breath. "I may have trust issues, but that doesn't change the fact that Quentin is cheating on you and planning a scam on our family property." Lysandra set the cup on the table so abruptly that the tea spilled out onto the saucer. "Where is he now? I want to talk to him, hear his side of the story." "I assume he's at home. Detective Brookhaven took him there after our meeting at the country house." "You got the police involved?" Lysandra looked shocked. "For God's sake, Mom, have you lost your mind?" Radley is an old friend of mine. He was there unofficially. But yes, I wanted to have witnesses to our confrontation." Lysandra grabbed his bag. "I'm going home, now, and don't call me unless I call you myself." I didn't try to stop her. I knew she wouldn't listen to me in her condition. When the door slammed shut, I sank heavily into the chair, feeling suddenly tired. The day had been hard, emotionally exhausting. But I'd done what I had to do. Now I had to wait. The evening passed in silence. I tried to read, but I couldn't concentrate. My phone was silent. I checked the camera footage at the country house. No movement. I wondered what was going on at Lysandra and Quentin's house right now. What kind of conversation did they have? Did she finally believe it? Around 9 p.m., the phone rang. I rushed to the phone thinking it was Lysandra, but it was Silas on the other end. "Aldine, I just got a letter from Quentin's lawyer. He's threatening to sue for breach of confidentiality and defamation." I wasn't surprised. It was a typical Quentin move to attack to defend himself. Does he really think it will work? "Legally, he doesn't stand a chance," Silas assured me. "The cameras were set up in your own house, and the charges are based on recorded evidence. But he's clearly trying to intimidate you." "I'm not easily intimidated," I said, feeling my anger boil over. "Let him file his lawsuits. We'll see how it looks in court when we produce all the records." "Be careful, Aldine," Silas warned. "Cornered types like Quentin can be dangerous." I thanked him for the warning and hung up. Then I called Radley to get an update. "It's quiet so far," he said. But I found out something interesting about Ms. Holt. She does work in real estate with Primrose Estate. And guess who their general partner is? Empire Developments? That's right. So her story could be true. She could have introduced Quentin to the right people for the deal. That information confirmed my suspicions, but it didn't get me any closer to resolving the Lysandra situation. I thanked Radley and disconnected. The night passed restlessly. I woke up several times, checking my phone to see if there were any missed calls from my daughter. In the morning, I ate breakfast, drank coffee, and decided to call myself, despite Lysandra's request not to. The phone rang for a long time, but no one answered. I left a message, "Lysandra, please call me. I'm worried." The day stretched agonizingly slow. I tried to keep myself busy. I watered the flowers, sorted out the mail, started reading a new detective novel, but my thoughts kept returning to my daughter. Around 3 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. I rushed to open it, hoping it was Lysandra, but there was a courier with an envelope on the doorstep. "Mrs. Aldine Campbell?" he asked. "There's a letter for you to sign." I signed the receipt and, closing the door, opened the envelope. Inside was an official notice from the law firm of Higgins, Pryor and Associates. Quentin had indeed filed a lawsuit for invasion of privacy, defamation, and infliction of emotional distress. He was seeking $100,000 in damages and a written apology. I chuckled bitterly. Typical Quentin thinks money will solve everything. I immediately called Silas and read him the document. "Don't worry," he said after listening. "It's a standard scare tactic. Legally, his position is weak. But, Alden, I have to ask, are you sure you want to go all the way? It could lead to a public scandal." "I'm not afraid of scandal," I replied firmly. "I'm afraid of my daughter living her life with a man who doesn't respect or love her." Silas sighed. "Good, I'll prepare a counterclaim. But the process could be long and unpleasant." After talking to Silas, I tried calling Lysandra again. Still no answer. I was starting to get seriously worried. What if Quentin had done something? No, I couldn't allow myself to think like that. Lysandra is a strong woman. She can stand up for herself. Radley called me this evening. "There's news about Rumi Holt," he said. "She's tendered her resignation. Rumor has it she's leaving town." "Running away," I said, feeling our chances of proving Quentin's guilt fading. "Scared of the consequences." "Sounds like it," Radley agreed. "I'll try to contact her, but if she's decided to disappear, it'll be hard to find her." My fears were confirmed the next morning when Lysandra finally called. "I talked to Quentin," she said. "He denies everything. He says you misunderstood, that Rumi was just a business associate, and that your notes were taken out of context." "And the woman?" I asked. "Have you tried to contact her?" "Yes, Quentin gave me her number, but the phone's disconnected. It seems like she's really gone." "That's suspicious, don't you think?" Lysandra was silent for a moment. "I don't know what to think, Mom. Yeah, I need time." Over the next few days, Lysandra did not return my calls. Quentin, through his attorney, continued to press the lawsuit, demanding that I retract my accusations and publicly apologize. Rumi Holt was still a no-show. Radley and Silas became more cautious in their support. "Without Rumi's testimony, the case becomes more complicated," Silas admitted during our meeting. "We have the tapes, but Quentin might insist they're misinterpreted. Maybe we should take a step back," Radley suggested. "Give Lysandra time to figure things out for herself." I looked at them in disbelief. "Are you suggesting I back off after everything we've learned?" "Not retreat," Silas said softly. A tactical pause. "Give Lysandra room to make her own decisions." "She's under Quentin's influence," I argued. "He's a master manipulator. He'll make her believe it's all my paranoia, my attempt to control her life." "Lysandra is a grown woman," Radley reminded me. "And she's smart. Maybe you should trust her more." I shook my head. "You don't understand. I was the same way, smart, grown up. And I still let Hugh control me for decades. I don't want my daughter to repeat my fate." Silas and Radley looked at each other. "We're on your side, Aldine," Silas said, "just suggesting an alternative strategy." "I know," I sighed, "and I appreciate your help. But I can't back down, not now." When they left, I felt more alone than ever. Even my allies had advised me to retreat. Even they thought I had gone too far. I sat in my garden, watching the sun go down. This garden had once been Hugh's territory, strictly geometric beds, perfectly trimmed bushes. After he died, I let the plants grow more freely, more naturally, just as I was finally freer myself. But what good is my freedom if Lysandra falls into the same trap? If she lives her life with a man who uses her the way Hugh used me? The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The number was unfamiliar. Aldine Campbell speaking. Mrs. Campbell. The woman's voice sounded strained. It's Rumi Holt. We need to talk. I straightened in my chair, clutching the phone receiver. Rumi, where are you? Radley said you quit your job and you were leaving. Yeah, yes, I was. But I couldn't. She sounded tired. Quentin called me, threatened me, said if I didn't disappear, he'd make sure no one would hire me in this industry. He's trying to keep you quiet, I said, feeling my anger rising. Because he's afraid of the truth. Maybe, she said quietly. But it's more than that. I'm pregnant, Mrs. Campbell, and I need a job, stability. I can't afford to make an enemy of a man like Quentin. I understand. I tried to speak softly. But would you allow me to meet with you? Talk to you in person? I promise I won't tell anyone about this meeting unless you want me to. Rumi was silent for a long time. I could hear her breathing through the phone, imagining her weighing the pros and cons. Okay, she said finally, but not in a public place. I'm staying at the Sunset Inn Motel on the eastern edge of town, number 12. Can you come tomorrow morning? I said yes, and we arranged to meet at 10 o'clock. After talking to Rumi, I called Radley and Silas and told them about the call. They both told me to be careful. It could be a trap, Radley warned. Quentin could have gotten her to call you. I'll take Hugh's gun with me, I said firmly. No, Radley objected firmly. No gun. I'll go with you, but I'll wait in the car. If you don't come out in half an hour, I'll come in. I reluctantly agreed. Then I dialed Lysandra's number, but still no answer. The night passed restlessly. I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about the strange twists and turns of fate, about how my quiet life as a widow had turned into a detective story with elements of family drama, about how I felt truly alive for the first time in years. I dressed carefully in the morning, a strict gray suit, minimal makeup, my hair tucked into a neat bundle. I wanted to look serious, to inspire confidence. At 9:30, Radley pulled up to the house. He was in civilian clothes, but I noticed he had a holster under his jacket. You ready? He asked as I got into the car. I nodded, feeling my heart pounding with excitement. The Sunset Inn was a modest two-story motel on the edge of town, a typical place for those who wanted to go unnoticed. Room 12 was on the first floor, at the very back of the building. I'll be here, Radley said, parking the car so he could see the room door. If anything goes wrong, get out right away. I nodded and got out of the car, heading toward the room. I knocked quietly but firmly. The door opened at once, as if Rumi were standing behind it, waiting. She looked pale and tired, the dark circles under her eyes a sign of sleepless nights. But what struck me most were her eyes. Amber brown, intelligent, wary, just like Quentin's. Come in, she said, letting me inside. The room was small and impersonal standard furniture, beige walls, green curtains. There was a laptop on the table and a cup of tea next to it. Thank you for agreeing to meet, I began, sitting down in the chair she offered me. Rumi sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. I could see her better now, in the daylight, a young woman, no more than 30, with delicate features and her hair in a sloppy ponytail. I'm listening to you, she said quietly. What did you want to discuss? The truth, I answered simply. About you, about Quentin, about his plans. My daughter deserves to know who she's committed her life to. Rumi lowered her gaze, nervously tugging at the hem of her sleeve. It's complicated, Mrs. Campbell. Very difficult. I know it is. But if you really are pregnant with Quentin's child, as you said when we met at the country house, Your fates with Lysandra will soon be even more closely linked. Through the child. At the mention of a child, Rumi put her hand on her stomach, a protective gesture I remembered from my pregnancy. Yes, I'm pregnant, she confirmed quietly. 4 months. And Quentin knows? He knows now. I hadn't planned to tell him, not now. But you showing up at the country house, it changed everything. I stared at her, trying to figure her out. Something in her story didn't add up. Tell me about yourself, Rumi, I asked. How long have you known Quentin? She looked up, a shadow of fear or determination in her eyes. We met 4 years ago, she began, at Primrose Estate where I worked. Quentin was an independent broker then, working with different agencies. 4 years? I didn't hide my surprise. But he'd been married to Lysandra for 6 years. Rumi nodded. Yes, but he said their marriage was formal, that they were separated, that divorce was only a matter of time. She grinned bitterly. A classic story, isn't it? A naive girl believing a married man. And did you? At first, yes. He was so persuasive, so attentive. He said he'd never met a woman like me, that our meeting was fate. I nodded as I listened. It sounded so familiar, the same words Hugh had once charmed me with, the same promises, the same gleam in his eyes. When did you learn the truth? That his marriage to Lysandra was real? About a year later, I happened to see them together at an event. They looked, happy, like a real couple. Rumi ran his hand through his hair. I was furious. I made a scene with Quentin, threatened to tell his wife. And what did he do? He did what he does best. He convinced me it wasn't what it looked like, said it was a performance for the clients, and then, he admitted that he had a plan that had a place for me. I stepped forward. What plan? Rumi stood up and walked over to the window, pulled back the curtain, looking out at the parking lot where Radley was waiting in his car. Then she turned to me. The plan was to use the marriage to Lysandra to gain access to the Campbell family estate. Quentin found out about your country house, the land, and that Empire Developments was interested in the land for a luxury development. And you agreed to be a part of that? I asked, feeling my anger rising. Not right away. Rumi shook her head. At first I refused. I wanted to end the relationship, but Quentin, he's very persuasive. He said that after the Empire deal, we'd have enough money to start a new life, that he'd leave Lysandra enough to keep her from being poor, that it would be, fair. Fair? I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Tricking a woman out of her husband and family property is fair? I know how it sounds. Rumi lowered her eyes. I'm not proud of myself. But then I was in love and ready to believe anything. I looked at her, and my irritation was slowly being replaced by a kind of pity. This young woman was as much a victim of Quentin as my daughter. And now? I asked. Do you still believe him? Rumi shook her head. No. In the last few months, I'd begun to realize that he'd never leave Lysandra, that I'm just a tool to help him get access to Empire Developments. I have connections there, you know. My uncle's one of the principals. And what were you planning on doing? Leave, Rumi said simply. Pack up and disappear. Start a new life somewhere where Quentin couldn't find me. And the baby? I asked gently. Were you going to tell Quentin about the baby? Rumi put her hand on her stomach again. I don't know. Maybe someday, when the baby grows up and wants to know who its father is. We sat in silence for a while, each absorbed in her own thoughts. Then I stood up resolutely. Rumi, I need proof. Records, messages, emails, anything that confirms Quentin's plan for our property. She looked at me questioningly. Why? What are you going to do with it? To protect my daughter, I answered simply. And you too, if you'll allow me. Me? Rumi looked genuinely surprised. Why do you care? Because we're both victims of the same man, and because you're carrying a child who will be a sibling to any of Lysandra's children. Family is complicated, Rumi, but it's all we have. She looked at me for a long moment, as if assessing the sincerity of my words. Then she nodded and walked over to the laptop. I have something. I've been copying some of the messages. Just in case. She opened a file folder and I saw dozens of screenshots of correspondence, documents, phone records. You've been gathering evidence against him all this time? I asked respectfully. Rumi shrugged. Call it a woman's intuition. I had a feeling I might need it someday. We spent the next hour going through the materials. There were messages where Quentin talked openly about plans for the country house, about the Empire Developments deal, about how he planned to get Lysandra's signature. In one message he wrote, "When the house is sold, we will take our share and disappear. Lysandra will never know where the money went, and the old woman won't be able to prove anything." I could feel the cold rage growing, not so much because of his calling me an old woman, but because of the ease with which he planned to deceive my daughter, who trusted him unconditionally. Will you let me make copies of all this? I asked Rumi. My cousin is a lawyer, and he'll help us get the evidence right. For what? She asked again. What do you plan to do? First, to protect our property from Quentin. Second, to open Lysandra's eyes. Third, to help you get what you and your child are owed. If Quentin is the biological father, he has obligations. I don't want anything from him, Rumi said quickly. Right now, maybe. But when the baby is born, you might change your mind. This evidence will help you. Rumi thought for a moment, then nodded. Good. I'll make copies for you. She took out a flash drive and started copying files. I watched her, pondering the strangeness of the situation. This woman with whom Quentin had cheated on my daughter was now becoming my ally. Life is full of irony. Can I ask you something, Rumi? I said when she was done. Of course. Why did you decide to tell me the truth? After you planned to leave? Rumi looked at me for a long moment. Because of you, she said at last. When you came to the country house with the policeman and the lawyer, I could see that you were willing to fight for your daughter without fear of repercussions. That impressed me. My mother never fought for me like that. There was a bitterness in her words that I understood. Sometimes we mothers make mistakes, I said softly, but that doesn't mean we don't love our children. Maybe, Rumi shrugged. Either way, I decided you deserve to know the truth. And so does your daughter. She handed me a flash drive. It's all here. Use it as you see fit. I took the flash drive, feeling its weight in my palm. Such a small thing, but containing information that could change our lives. What are you going to do now? I asked Rumi. I don't know yet. Maybe I'll leave after all. If you agree, I'd like you to talk to Lysandra. She deserves to hear the truth from you. Rumi is visibly tense. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. I understand, but think about it. Sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing that can be truly freeing. We exchanged phone numbers, and I promised to keep her in the loop. I extended my hand to her in farewell, and after a hesitation, she shook it. Thank you, Rumi, for your honesty. Don't thank me. She shook her head. I've been complicit in lies for too long. I left the motel and headed for Radley's car. He looked worried. I'd been inside for over an hour. Is everything okay? He asked. I was just about to follow you. Everything's fine. I showed him the flash drive. I have what we need. Irrefutable evidence against Quentin. On the way out, I told Radley about my conversation with Rumi. He listened intently, sometimes shaking his head in surprise. So they were together before his marriage to Lysandra? He asked. Yes, and she believed he would divorce Lysandra after the deal. A classic scheme, Radley remarked grimly. Using one woman to gain access to money and promising the other a bright future that never happens. Do you think he was planning to trick Rumi too? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Of course he did. Guys like Quentin don't stop at one victim. He'd take the money and disappear, leaving both women with nothing. We stopped by Silas' place straight from the motel. My cousin was in the office, working on some paperwork. When we showed him the contents of the flash drive, his normally calm face showed a look of amazement. "This is impressive," he said. "There's enough evidence here to not only beat back his lawsuit, but to counter-sue him, maybe even prosecute him for attempted fraud." "What do we do now?" I asked. "First, I'll prepare all these materials for the court." Silas began making notes. "I'll get them properly organized so they're legally enforceable. For that, we'll need Rumi's official testimony. Is she willing to testify?" "I'm not sure," I answered honestly. "She's afraid of Quentin. But maybe if I explained to her what kind of protection she could get." "I could talk to her," Radley suggested. "Explain that we can get her police protection if Quentin tries to threaten her." "Good idea," I nodded. "But I need to talk to Lysandra first. She needs to know the truth." Silas and Radley looked at each other. "Are you sure she's ready to listen?" Silas asked cautiously. "I'm her mother," I said firmly. "Even if she's mad at me, I have to try." They didn't argue. While Silas made copies of the files and started preparing the paperwork, I dialed my daughter's number. To my surprise, this time she answered almost immediately. "Mom?" Her voice sounded wary. "Lysandra, we need to talk. It's important. I have new information about Quentin." A pause, then a quiet sigh. "I'm not sure I want to hear anything else." "Please." I rarely asked her for anything, and she knew it. "One conversation. After that, if you decide I'm wrong, I'll back off. I promise." Another pause, a longer one. "Okay, be there at 5 a. Quentin will be in a meeting until late afternoon." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "I'll be there." After talking to Silas and Radley, I went home to collect my thoughts before I met with my daughter. I needed to be as convincing as possible, to show her the evidence in a way she couldn't reject. At 5:30, I drove to Lysandra and Quentin's house. An exquisite two-story mansion in an upscale neighborhood. Quentin had always sought the trappings of success. My daughter, who previously valued simplicity, under his influence also began to attach importance to ostentatious luxury. Lysandra met me at the door. She looked tired but focused. Her eyes, Hugh's eyes, gray-blue, too penetrating, were wary. "Come in," she said, letting me into the house. "Quentin's in a meeting, and he'll be back late." I followed her into the living room, modern, minimalist, with white walls and leather furniture. Quentin's style, not Lysandra's. "Lysandra, I don't have much time." I sat down on the couch and put the file folder next to me. "What I want to show you is very important." "I'm listening, Mom." Her voice sounded tired. "What did you find this time?" I opened the folder and took out a flash drive. Rumi Holt gave it to me. There's correspondence between her and Quentin, plans for our country house, evidence of their relationship. Lysandra looked at the flash drive with undisguised disbelief. "And you expect me to believe evidence from the woman you say is my husband's mistress? I expect you to look at it and draw your own conclusions," I replied calmly. "All messages are dated. All files can be checked." I inserted the flash drive into her laptop on the coffee table and opened the first file. It was correspondence between Quentin and Rumi, dated 2 years earlier. "When will you finally tell her the truth?" Rumi wrote. "All in good time," Quentin replied. "First, we need to finalize the deal on the country house. After that, we'll have enough money to make a fresh start. Lysandra read silently, her face growing paler and paler. I opened file after file, correspondence, photos, documents about the planned deal with Empire Developments. This, this could be fake, she objected weakly, but I could see the doubt already creeping in. I opened another file, an audio recording of a conversation between Quentin and someone at Empire Developments. Deadlines are tight, Parkhurst. A male voice said, "We need this site by the end of the year." "Don't worry," Quentin replied with smugness. "My wife will sign all the papers next week. She doesn't even read what she signs. And her mother is too old and naive to suspect anything." Lysandra closed the laptop abruptly. Her hands trembled. "Enough of this. Yeah, I have to think about this." "Lysandra," I touched her hand gently. "I know how much it hurts. I know you love him and want to believe in the best." "Facts," she said bitterly. "Always the facts. You were always so rational, Mom. Always knew what was right and what was wrong." In her words, I heard a long-standing resentment, the resentment of a child whose mother was too strict, too demanding. I felt a prick of guilt. "I didn't always know what was right," I admitted quietly. "With your father, I let him control our lives, even when I knew it was wrong. Out of fear, out of weakness." Lysandra looked at me in surprise. I rarely talked about my relationship with Hugh, especially the negative aspects of it. "You never told me." "Because I was ashamed." I stood up and walked to the window. "Ashamed to admit that I'd let him break me, that I hadn't protected you from his control. That's why I can't stay silent now, seeing history repeat itself." Silence hung in the room. Then Lysandra slowly stood up. "I will call Quentin. I'll tell him to come home, now." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Maybe you need time to think about it." "No." Her voice was firm. "I want to hear his explanation, in person, looking him in the eye." She dialed her husband's number and told him briefly that he needed to come home immediately, that something important had happened. "He'll be here in 20 minutes, Lysandra said. "Are you going to stay?" I hesitated. On the one, Quentin entered the living room, loosening his tie as he went. He was handsome, tall, with correct facial features and wavy dark hair, but his eyes, amber brown like Rumi's, always seemed too cold to me. "Lysandra, what happened?" He froze when he saw me. "Alden, I didn't realize we had company." "This is not a social visit, Quentin," I replied calmly. "Lysandra wants to talk to you." His eyes flicked to the laptop, to the file folder, and I saw his face tense. "About what?" His voice sounded nonchalant, but I saw him clench his fists. Lysandra turned the laptop screen toward him. "About Rumi Holt. About your plans for the country house. About how you were going to trick me and my mother." Quentin froze. Then his face took on an expression of righteous indignation. "What nonsense? Who told you that nonsense?" He cast an accusing glance in my direction. "Your mother, of course. She was always trying to destroy our marriage." "No one said anything to me." Lysandra pointed to the screen. "I can see it with my own eyes. Your own words, Quentin. Your correspondence with Rumi. Your plans." "It's fake," he said quickly. "It's obvious that your mother fabricated this evidence. She never accepted me." "Rumi is pregnant by you," Lysandra said calmly. "Is that fake too?" Quentin turned pale. It was a blow he hadn't expected. "Yeah, it's," he stammered. "It's more complicated than it seems." "Explain it to me." Lysandra crossed her arms. "Explain to me how my husband came to have a child with his mistress. How is it more complicated than it seems?" Quentin glanced at the door, as if thinking of an escape route, then tried to regain his composure. "Okay, I admit it. There was an affair. One mistake, but it doesn't mean anything. I love you, Lysandra. I always have. And the country house? She wouldn't back down. The plans to sell his empire? It was just a business idea. He tried to smile. I'd been researching the market, looking at possibilities. Nothing concrete. Lysandra turned on the audio recording of the conversation with the Empire representative. Quentin listened, and I could see the mask of confidence slipping from his face. "Where did you get this?" he asked hoarsely when the tape ended. "Rumi kept it," Lysandra replied. "For her own protection, I guess. Clever girl." "She betrayed me?" Quentin hissed. "After all I'd done for her." "What have you done for her?" Lysandra asked with bitter irony. "Lied? Used her? Abandoned her pregnant? Do you really trust her more than you trust me? Your husband." "I believe the facts," Lysandra said firmly. "And the facts say you're a liar." Quentin changed tactics. His shoulders slumped, a look of remorse on his face. "Okay, I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I can change, Lysandra, for you, for us. Give me another chance. Lysandra is stronger than I ever was." "No," she said firmly. "It's over between us, Quentin. I want you to pack your things and leave, tonight." "You can't just kick me out," he said indignantly. "It's my house, too." "The house is registered to me," Lysandra reminded him. "It was a wedding gift from my mother. You are entitled to some of the property, but not the house itself." Quentin looked shocked. "You can't do that," he said with a threatening tone in his voice. "I'll sue you. I've already sued your mother for installing the cameras." "Go ahead," Lysandra said calmly. "We have all the evidence of your infidelity and fraudulent plans. I think the judge will be interested." Without another word, Quentin turned and left the room. A few minutes later, we heard him coming up the stairs and opening the closets, gathering his things. Lysandra sank down on the couch. Her shoulders slumped. Now that the confrontation was over, she looked devastated. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "No, but I will be, eventually." "You can stay at my place if you want," I offered. "The house is big and you won't be alone." Lysandra looked at me in surprise. "Do you really want to do that, after everything I've said to you?" "You're my daughter," I answered simply. "No matter what happens, that will never change." Quentin came down with his suitcase and stopped at the door. "You'll regret this, Lysandra," he said. "When your emotions subside, you'll realize you made a mistake." "The only mistake I made was marrying you," she replied quietly. "And believe me, I already regret it." Quentin slammed the door and left. Lysandra agreed to stay with me, and we packed her things. At home, I showed Lysandra her room, the same room she'd grown up in. I had kept it almost unchanged, only replacing the children's furniture. We cooked dinner together. At the table, Lysandra asked, "Why didn't you leave your father? After you realized what he was like?" I slowly put down my fork. "Out of fear," I admitted. "And because of you, of course. Hugh threatened to take you away if I left. He had money, connections. All I had was love for you." "Do you think he would have done that?" Without hesitation, I nodded. Hugh never let go of what he thought was his. "Just as Quentin never let go of me," Lysandra added quietly. "Yes, history has a way of repeating itself if you don't learn its lessons." Lysandra stayed with me during the divorce proceedings. Quentin didn't give up easily, threatened, manipulated, tried to turn his friends against Lysandra. But the evidence Rumi had gathered was irrefutable. My relationship with my daughter remained strained. Too much unspoken between us, too many old grudges. But there was hope of restoring them. We began to talk about things we had previously kept quiet. I realized that my bossiness and control had always been just defense mechanisms against the fear of loss. But even at 74, I wasn't ready to change completely. Old habits die hard. You know, Mother, Lysandra said one day as we sat in the garden. I was always afraid of becoming like you. Instead, I chose a man like my father. We all make mistakes, I replied. It's important to learn from them. What lesson did you learn? She asked with interest. That it's never too late to start living your own life, I said, looking at my roses, which I had planted myself after Hugh's death. Even at 74,